All this Kislev coverage has left me with a hankering for hybrid missile melee infantry. Thankfully, Wei came through with a replay featuring the Dwarfs, Rangers with great weapons, an awesome hybrid melee missile infantry we have in the game right now. Appropriately enough, going to be up against the Warriors of Chaos. So let's get to the builds before we get too fun here. Wei definitely going aggressive with Belagar Ironhammer. Bit of a rush, not too many missile units, all somewhat short range. In fact, basically no long range. He's just got the Rangers with great weapons, 3 giant slayers in the back, very strong backbone there, miners, and plenty of longbeards with great weapons. So very interesting build. A lot of armor piercing up against the Warriors of Chaos, which does make sense. We've got some Marauder Horsemen, a couple Manticores, Sigvald, Lore of Metal Sorcerer, a bunch of Chaos Warriors with great weapons, and some regular Marauders up front. Now, one thing to note, they do call them close quarters infantry, but it's mostly because they have a very short ranged attack, right? 80 range on these Rangers with great weapons is really not great, but just look at the missile damage here. I mean, you compare this to something like handguns or thunderers that do like 17 to 19 damage over 10 seconds, 45 damage over 10 seconds, 26 AP is insane. Just the amount of damage they can pump out in a short period of time is pretty ridiculous. I mean, again, the short range does kind of counteract that somewhat, but they also have armor piercing and melee as well with 30 weapon strength total. Not the greatest sustained stats, like you definitely don't want them fighting a straight up fight against Chaos Warriors, for example, but here with the Slayer support, they might be able to get in some chip damage, and yeah, they're going to skedaddle on out of there. Being Rangers doesn't mean they get the stock and Vanguard deployment, but of course they do lack the armor that most Dwarf units have. But let's see, they're going to pull up in here. The 2 Manticores just get absolutely wrecked by these Giant Slayers. There's a lot of Marauder Horsemen here trying to use up their ammunition, and like Javelins will do a pretty decent job shooting the Rangers with great weapons. They don't have a missile block chance, but really for the Chaos player here, he needs to be charging his Horsemen to engage the Rangers with great weapons in melee, just because then, at the very least, you can tie them down, and only 20 melee defense, 22 melee attack. I mean, the Marauder Horsemen can actually take them to a degree in melee. Like, yeah, all these Giant Slayers are dangerous, but at least while you had the Manticores in there, it would have been nice to have them tie those guys down. But meanwhile, the Rangers just going to return fire here. Of course, armor piercing, a little bit overkill, but at the same time, just that massive overall weapon damage, huge DPS, definitely still a factor. We can see Sigvald fighting here in the center. Some of these Giant Slayers and Longbeards. Searing Doom definitely be pretty solid against the Giant Slayers. It's not going to do a lot to the regular Dwarf infantry. This is probably one matchup I would actually say. We recently made a video about Searing Doom, but yeah, this is maybe the one matchup where you wouldn't take it. It's still pretty decent, though. You can see the Rangers just chucking their axes here, absolutely ruining those ruinous powers. And Belagar now getting tangled up with Sigvald with the support of these Longbeards' great weapons, and also, of course, this entire unit of Rangers with great weapons just hucking axes point blank at him. A little bit of friendly fire there. Definitely that one in particular is going to be a Slayer now. Oh, a couple more Slayers. But yeah, Sigvald's going to rout. And that's pretty much game. I mean, Dwarfs can't really chase him. He's, what, 40 speed, so even then, he's significantly faster than the Rangers. Question is, are they just going to straight up finish him off here? He goes down to 84. Looks like he's squeaking out of range. Auric Armor does not replenish him while he's routing, so he could potentially get finished off here. Slayers are 40 speed, so if they get their charge animation, maybe they could catch him, but it's possible he comes back. At this point, though, the Warriors of Chaos, the Warriors of Chaos forces overall are looking very tattered. The balance power very heavily in the Dwarfs' favor. Just the axe DPS here is so legit. This Crossfire is a horrible place to be, and then the few strung out Chaos Warriors that do make it into the fight, of course, again, face armor piercing, melee attacks, so that's not going to be the most fun either. Manticore lands in again, actually gets some pretty good damage. The Manticore kind of non-AP monster is very good against the Rangers, as long as it doesn't take too much damage, but Iron Drakes still online. The Trollhammer torpedoes lighten that up. Another Manticore coming in for a push can interrupt them, and we've also got these Warriors moving in to try and finish them off. So Chaos player definitely attempting a comeback. Sigvald back from route, regenerating, fleeing from the Giant Slayers. So let's see. The push is on. His Rangers here getting terrified. These other ones just running from Chaos Warriors. Looks like they might end up getting caught, but let's kind of keep that in the background. Elsewhere, Longbeard's chasing units off, kind of getting tangled up with Marauders here. That's a great trade for them. And yeah, the Greatweapons do manage to actually escape those Chaos Warriors with Greatweapons. And this other unit just point blank chucking axes. A couple of units. Oh no, those throwing axes are from the Marauders, that's right. God, don't you love it? Chaos and Dwarfs just hucking axes at each other. Just yeeting tomahawks in the desert. Beautiful sight, honestly. Oh man. And it's interesting to compare these guys, you know, Streltsy, based on what I saw in the demo, and by the way, there's a video up on my channel, a couple videos actually, covering my experience with that, and all the new units we saw. The Streltsy's one of them, the hybrid AP missile melee infantry, of course, if you're living under a rock and you haven't seen yet. But these guys, they definitely have much higher missile strength, much shorter range, but of course they don't have the armor. They're like Vanguard, right? Stock as well, so a little bit of a different unit, but it has some ability to be compared to the Streltsy. Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. But Dwarf Rangers with Greatweapons are definitely a good option for factions that can't counter-range fire super effectively. Like Chaos, Warriors of Chaos are kind of the perfect matchup for them in my mind, just because you're very likely to see quite a bit of heavy armor units. And, you know, you're very likely to also be fighting a rush, which is going to get in at close range. Therefore, you can't always take advantage of a longer range unit. And these guys can just deliver the pain, you know, point blank, right? And Chaos, I mean, other than a Hell Cannon, they don't really have too much range to contest you, you know, beyond what the throwing axes can reach, right? The Greatweapons here, because, yeah, Horseman throwing axes 70, the javelins are 80 range, right? So the range of the Greatweapons are the same. They can at least compete. With good micro, the missile cav are obviously able to kind of rinse and repeat in and out and dodge the shots. Charging in back, not necessarily charging, but just like coming up within range and then pulling back. But here they are actually charging in. Those Rangers are out of ammunition at this point, though. Unfortunately, Sigvald is going to get tangled up with Giant Slayers and Belagar and very quickly rout, leading to army losses. So great game, honestly. A little bit close in the balance of power indicated there in the late game, but well played to both. Man, those Rangers with Greatweapons, only 3 of them on the field, but all of them just brutal damage, definitely paying for themselves. I mean, even this one, only, quote-unquote, 648 for a unit that's, what, like 650 points? In fact, let's go look. I should probably have known that before I started recording this video, but that's okay. Giant Slayers also do pretty decent. Don't all pay for themselves, but pretty close. Longbeard's also holding, the line very admirably. Belagar doing his thing. Sigvald does actually get canned here, which is interesting. I mean, the Giant Slayers just have high enough attack and weapon strength that they can punch him, I guess. But, yeah, the Warriors with Greatweapons largely have a really bad time because of the Rangers. And Horsemen do end up pretty much all paying for themselves. So you definitely, I would say, want to max Horsemen in this matchup. But, yeah, the Mantecores, interesting to see them not pay for themselves. They often do, but they are still just a low-tier monster that you can manage, especially with the Enrage and everything. So, yeah, in terms of units, it's interesting. There's only really one unit right now that's super comparable to the Rangers with Greatweapons, right? And it's a unit that I have made a video about before, long ago, you know, sometime last year, I don't remember, but yeah, Rangers with Greatweapons versus, of course, the Norskin Hunters with throwing axes. Now, the throwing axes don't have armor-piercing melee attacks. They do have just better combat stats overall, though. 14 additional melee attack, and, yeah, quite a bit more HP as well. Less armor, but, yeah, they also have Shield Breaker, which is nice. But look at that. Even the Dwarfs having more missile damage. Just such a ridiculous amount of DPS, honestly. Yeah, 26 AP. Man, that is so strong. Here, 22 AP, right? So, yeah, Dwarf Rangers, somewhat of a unique unit, but there are some comparisons to be made elsewhere. In terms of kind of where they fit, again, up against, honestly, Norska's probably a good option to bring them as well. They might get run over by Marauders and Chariots, but at the same time, you know, if they can pull a beat up on something, they will absolutely annihilate it, and if they end up getting engaged by something like a Chariot, they at least have the AP to try and get some hits in. Get a little more damage. I mean, Marauder Chariots, Chaos Chariots do have 90 armor, right? So, Norska, Warriors of Chaos, or maybe 2 factions I would potentially try these guys against. Norska, you might not think necessarily heavy armor, but, you know, like Mammoths have a really good amount of armor, and even then it's just more about the raw DPS, because Norska's somewhat squishy. You can just hit them really hard initially, like they tend to fall apart, so there's that, some considerations. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this one. If you do like this sort of content, though, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.